In the last video, I showed you a game where the King's Gambit BONG cloud variation failed spectacularly, an utter disaster. So I've got to redress the bounce and show you a game where it succeeded beautifully. Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe, and do consider supporting us via PayPal or Patreon. Links down there somewhere. Okay, let's have a look at this game. I think you're going to enjoy this. So this was a game between Tim Wall, who has made his name in the chess scene in England as an organiser and a chess coach. And he's also a journalist too. And he's playing against Dean Ippolito, who's an international master from America. This was played in a Hampstead Invitational tournament in England in 1998. So here we go. It's this variation. This has many names. Some people call it the Mason-Keres Gambit. I've seen it called the Pernau Gambit. I'm going to just call it the King's Gambit BONG cloud variation, because after this check, which is really, I think, the principled way to play for black, the king has to step up the board in classic BONG cloud fashion. So we've already seen a couple of games with this where black has played d5, and I do feel that this is the best way to approach this system. Basically, after knight takes, the main lines are bishop g4 check. And here black has a choice between playing knight c6 and sacrificing here. That's actually very, very unclear. Or you can play bishop d6, and then we get this position. And, well, if you remember, Spassky played e5 against Fuhrman. You can find that video somewhere down there in the King's Gambit playlist or wherever. But in fact, c3 is an interesting move for white here. But I feel that's kind of the main line. You know, black gives up a pawn and just gets his piece out very quickly. But it's actually not so clear. But here Ippolito plays d6. I already feel that white has kind of won the psychological battle after d6. I just don't think it's that bad for white, actually. Knight f3 from Tim Wall. So attacking the queen. If the queen goes back, well, if white can play d4, recapture the f-pawn, shuffle the king out of the way, white just has a huge position. So black needs to remain active. Bishop g4. Now, I've seen knight d5 played in this position. In fact, it's been played in quite a few games. Keres actually played like this. Keres was, one of the players that really pioneered this system with white. He played a series of correspondence games in the early 1930s, and he won with knight d5. I prefer d4. I think Tim's move is better. You shouldn't be moving a piece twice in the opening. There you go. I'm ticking off the great Paul Keres. d4 looks very natural to me. We just want to regain the pawn with bishop f4. And here Ippolito played g5. Well, I was looking this up and saw that recently there was an online game played between two decent players, Zabritsky and Vovk. Vovk is a 2570 grandmaster from Ukraine. And he played knight c6, but after this, well, now he took on f3. I don't think you need to do that. I know the king looks very strange here, but it's very hard to exploit the slightly odd position of the king. After this, well, Vovk went for the endgame, but it's evident that white has a massive advantage already. White controls the centre with the pawns and has two beautiful bishops. What's not to like? And in fact, white did win that game. Now, there are alternatives to that. Black doesn't need to play in such a cowardly way, or, I don't know, cautious way. There's no point in going to a worse endgame like that. But knight c6 is the most common move, actually, curiously. Anyway, in this game, g5 played. And this is a risky move. Could be very good, because the pawn on f4 is solidly protected, preventing or discouraging the bishop from coming into the game. Problem is, if white later on manages to break up those pawns, then black's kingside pawns will be an utter mess. So now knight d5. Well, that looks like a good idea. Threatening to take on c7, forking king and rook. And you could say the obvious defense of this, knight a6, well, for one thing, it's not a very beautiful square for the knight. And actually, king d2 exploits that straight away, because we might be able to take here. And if queen f2, that's no bother at all. We can play queen e2. And I think that's a pretty reasonable endgame for white. Already this is threatened, as well as bishop a6. White certainly has sufficient compensation for a pawn. Let's go back. So knight d5, basically black has to move the king. So those are the choices, d7 or d8. Ippolito played king d8, reasonable. And here my computer likes king d2. Wall played king d3. I mean, I suppose the idea is similar. I mean, in both cases, basically white wants to play c3 or maybe c4, and then just bring the king back to safety with king c2. And in fact, white's king is not badly placed there. I mean, both kings have problems now. Neither king can castle. King d3 is very much in the spirit of this whole variation, of course. So having moved the king to d3, you can see it stepped out of this pin, so that white now threatens to play knight takes queen. And here black should probably just step back with queen h5. But it's a pretty unclear position. My computer sort of throws out this variation. And now instead of taking here, f5 takes, and then queen takes g4. Well, I mean, I have no idea what's going on there. It looks like good fun, though. But instead of queen h5, black got a bit cute here. Pawn to c6. Interesting stuff. Okay, first of all, let's look at the obvious move. What happens if knight takes queen? Well, then bishop takes queen. Both knights are attacked, so knight c3 attacks the bishop. Bishop comes back to h5. Knight f3 attacks this pawn. f6. Now white needs to be able to break up that pawn mass. But actually, here black is solid enough. You know, if he can get in bishop g7, protect that. Maybe bishop g6 and get some pressure here. Black is actually okay there. Okay, let's go back. So perhaps you'd like to have a think. How would you play here if you had white? The endgame is certainly a bit better for black. So how would you respond to that pawn move, c6, attacking the knight? Well, queen d2 was played. Excellent move. I can imagine this one took black by surprise. Two threats, queen a5 check, as well as knight takes queen. So really there's only one decent move for black. That's bishop takes knight. So if pawn takes bishop, then pawn takes knight here. So we've got a hurtle on with queen a5 check. And if the king moves here, for example, then knight c7. That's not on. So black has to play pawn to b6. What now? Well, we just have to keep going. So knight takes b6. And now black decided, okay, he's going to give up this bishop. It's kind of dropping off anyway, so why not drag white's king into the middle? And only then he took here. And now, well, if queen takes, then actually the king is pretty safe. So queen takes rook. Okay, things have settled. Let's just take stock of this position. Well, white has played absolutely in the spirit of this BONG cloud variation, and the king finds itself under the influence, staggering around halfway up the board. Excellent stuff. Is it bad? In fact, it's not bad for white, this position, incredibly. And perhaps you'd like to have a think, how would you play with black here? It's not so easy, and in the game, black got it spectacularly wrong. The best is to play d5 check, knocking the king back, bishop d6, covers the knight, bishop d2, knight f6, black develops finally, and then after c3 the king comes back to c2. That's a very common theme in this variation, and then potentially bishop d3. Maybe if black is slow with his own play, then that a pawn could actually rush down the board to connect queen and rook. I mean, that's just a very unclear position, but white is certainly not worse. But here black played queen e1. Black played very ambitiously. Queen e1 check. So that forces the king back. And then he played king c8 to guard the knight. So at the moment we have this bizarre situation where both queens have made it to the other side of the board and no other pieces involved. I suppose with the queen on the back rank, black was hoping to prevent these bishops coming into play, but he was in for a rude shock. Black to play. What do? Bishop takes pawn. That's the threat. So queen takes rook. I mean, that's forced. And now rook sack number 2. Bishop e2. Beautiful. It's like Anderson Kieseritzky. The double rook sacrifice. Black has nothing better. And then the bishops are unleashed. Unleash bishops. That sounds slightly dodgy. Bishop g4 check. f5. Well, that creates a little bit of room for the king on the other side of the board. But basically, it's forced checkmate. The queen connects with the bishops. And it is all over. And in this position, after bishop e5, black actually resigned. Well, let's just go to mate. Knight f6 here. And bishop e6, checkmate. That is a spectacular final position. And what a spectacular game. Good stuff. Well played, Tim Wall. That's his Immortal game. And thank you for, I can't remember who recommended it on the channel. But yeah, it's a game I knew of already, and I'd be meaning to show this one. But thanks for pushing me, whoever it was. I can't remember who it was. Shout out to them. I'll mention them later. Okay, good stuff. Thanks very much for watching. And if you want to check out some King's Gambit theory, some King's Gambit tactics, then remember my 2 King's Gambit DVDs are on sale from the ChessBase online shop. Thanks for watching.